Welcome to the Unseminary Podcast. Are you looking for practical ministry help to drive your ministry further, faster? Have a sinking feeling that your ministry training didn't prepare you for the real world? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others in pursuit of stuff that we wish they had taught in seminary. Buckle up, and let's get started with this week's Unseminary Podcast.
All right, well, happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to the Unseminary Podcast. My name's Rich Birch, the host around these parts. So excited to have Drew Dixon on the phone today as a part of this. It's going to be a great conversation. Excited to have Drew. He's from an organization called Game Church, which I think I'm going to be introducing you to today. So, Drew, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Yeah, glad to be here.
Well, Game Church, I bumped into this. A friend of mine, actually Corin Bauer, who's been both done a course for us at Unseminary and also been on the podcast in the past. She said, you've got to reach out to these guys at Game Church. They're doing some interesting stuff. So why don't you tell us, what is Game Church?
Yeah, so Game Church is a nonprofit ministry based in Ventura, California. We go to there's two big arms of what we do, I guess. We go to video game trade shows and conventions and nerd culture conventions, so not just video game shows, but things like the Electronic Entertainment Expo, which is the largest trade show in the United States. There's a big fan convention called Penny Arcade that we go to every year. We go to a lot of the Comic Cons, like, there's a bunch. We go to a lot of these comic conventions, and we're there to tell people Jesus loves you, have some free stuff. So we have a gamer Bible that's got Jesus on it with an Xbox 360 controller, and so it's got some. It's the Gospel of John with some gamer commentary, kind of game themed commentary in it, and so really kind of that side of Game Church is motivated by this reality that people love video games, and we live in a culture where something like 190, I think, recently 190 million Americans play video games for like an hour a day. Right. So that's an incredible statistic, and so we think the church shouldn't ignore that. We shouldn't ignore the fact that people are into those things, and if people are into those things, then we should be into them too. Not that we have to love video games, but I think Christians should be people who care about what their neighbors care about and want to engage the things that their neighbors are engaged in for the sake of the gospel. And so we're there to be, it's not, you can't go to these conventions and be like, how many sins did you commit this week? Or or things like that. At these conventions, people are there to have fun. They're there to play games. We're there to say, hey, we want you to know that games are awesome. God is the father of all things. He's the source of all things. But and we think games are great too. So we're just here to tell you that Jesus loves you and that there's hope. There's a God who is sovereign over all things and loves them. And so we're not there to be confrontational, but we are there to be a presence, because there's Christians outside the show with signs that say, if you read comic books or if you play video games, you're going to hell. And so we want to be a voice that says, that's not what we're here for. We're here to tell you Jesus loves you. Have some free stuff, and if they read that Bible, that gamer Bible, they'll find out about the greatest story in the history of the universe, the story of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So
one of the things I love about what you guys have done, I think you've done an incredible job. I'm not a huge gamer. I have dabbled a little bit, but the thing I've appreciated about what you guys do is I think you do an incredible job trying to contextualize using gamer language to communicate the message of Christ, which I think is great. I think is amazing. I think we need to find ways to continue to re-articulate this story in a way that connects with today's culture. What are some of the ways that you've done that? You've tried to talk about the gamer Bible, the picture of Jesus with the PS4 controller or the PS4 controller. What are some of those ways you've done that?
Yeah. So another big thing is, and I didn't get into this earlier, and I should have, but the main thing that I do with Game Church is I'm the editor-in-chief of the website. Right. So on GameChurch.com, we have a site that's dedicated to exploring the spiritual side of video games. And we're very much committed to doing that in a way that's interesting, that's engaging, that's thoughtful, that is our intended audience is not Christians with that website. We talk about it all the time. And even when guys come and want to write for us, we say, look, do not write this like you're writing to the guys in your Sunday school class.
Right.
Write this like you're writing to anyone you'd have a conversation with at a convention or somebody that you might play games with or somebody who lives down the street. Just write it to people. And so on that website, we do interviews with game developers where we talk to them about their religious beliefs. 90% of those guys are either agnostic or atheist. I'm not exaggerating. That's just what they are. Most of the video game developers we talk to are not religious people.
Right.
And so that gives us an opportunity to engage them and talk to them about what matters to them, what they care about, and have a conversation about spirituality that I think is pretty rare on the internet. We do a podcast as well where we do something similar. We talk to game developers. We had Ken Levine on recently, who's the creative director of BioShock and BioShock Infinite, and talked to him about religion and BioShock. So all those things, hopefully we're modeling. I mean, hopefully we're reaching out through that website to people who are not Christians and challenging them to think about spirituality, about belief, about eternity, about all those things that are important or are central to the gospel. But also, hopefully, we're modeling for the church what it means to engage culture. What it means. Like we're trying to be a meaningful part of the world of video games. So when you come to our site, hopefully you see people who care about video games, who think they're amazing, who think they have a lot to say about the world. Because people are made in the image of God, I think you see even from like video games that are made by people who are not believers, you see all kinds of things that are true and good and interesting in them. And of course, there's things that are not so good in the video game industry, and I think we should be and on the website we try to be honest about that. There's a lot of misogyny in video games. There's a lot of I don't think all violence in video games is bad, but there's an overemphasis for sure on violence. There's a lack of redemptive violence in video games. There's a lot of cultural insensitivity in video games. So those are problems that we try to be honest about, but we also want to acknowledge the times when video games say things that are true. And there's a lot of, I could share with you a bunch of amazing games that are saying truthful things that, if we'll have the eyes to see and ears to hear, we can actually engage those things in a way that shepherds our hearts towards Christ rather than away from them, I think. Yeah,
I think this is a great conversation to be having. One of the things that I think as we, this gamer influence is massive in our culture, right? It is one of those, you bump into people all the time, and it seems to be one of those cultural, I don't know why this is, and this could be, I value your opinion on this. Gaming seems to be one of those things that there is a strong subculture built around it, but there is within the church world, for whatever reason, there's almost like a weird stigma around it. And why do you suppose that is? Or am I just hanging out with the wrong people who just think who are maybe perpetuating a false stigma?
Yeah. I think it's changing, but I think you're absolutely right. I think the church is shifting away from being kind of fearful of games, but we still default to that position of being kind of fearful, questioning them, like, oh, well, those things are like, they're really violent. Don't they kind of every time there's some tragedy in the news, Fox News runs a piece about how it's video games' fault, And I think that's our default thing to do, is to be like, oh, well, let's question it. This is probably dangerous. This is probably not good. And we should question everything that we put into our minds. But I think that comes from just this fundamentalism. I think is still something that Christianity is moving away from, particularly in the United States. But sorry. That's fine. I think there certainly is that stigma, and I think what needs to happen is Christians need to think more carefully, more thoughtfully about what does it mean to be salt and light in the world? Like, what does it mean to be an influence for the sake of Christ in the world? I think Christ was someone who very much engaged the world, engaged people, engaged culture, was interested in the lives of other people. And so I think that's what drives me, and I think that's what drives game churches. We say we want to be interested in the lives of people. People care about video games, so we should too.
Right. Absolutely.
and people are invested in them. So we should invest in them on some level as well.
What would you say would be some first steps that a church could say? Let's say there's a church leader listening in today. It's like, yeah, you know what? This is an area we need to step up our game a little bit. Pardon the pun. How could a church, a ministry, an individual, church leader kind of take steps to try to engage kind of gamer culture around them?
Yeah. I think probably the first thing that needs to happen, and in some churches anyway, is they need to stop saying stupid things about it.
Right, exactly.
Like I think it probably it starts in the pulpit. Like, be more thoughtful. Like, it's easy to just say video games are stupid and probably sinful. I mean, usually pastors don't come out and say they're sinful, but they say things like, they're not sinful, but they're a big waste of time, and you should probably be outside playing with your kids instead, or whatever.
Yes.
And so by saying those things, we're kind of condemning, I think, a huge portion of the population that isn't actually doing anything wrong.
Right.
Like, sure, there are guys that are in their 30s and 40s living in their parents' basement that play way too much video games. That's a problem, sure. But by saying those things, we're condemning people that really we should be coming alongside and taking an interest in. So I would say to pastors and church leaders, like, take an interest in the things that your people care about. Like, your people... Pastor, if I was talking to a pastor, say, Pastor, your people are playing video games. They care about video games. So take an interest in them. Ask questions. Talk to people. Try to understand why people care about video games before you say anything about them from the pulpit. But even from the pulpit, too, I think I would challenge pastors to, talk about those things. Challenge people to play games with their kids, challenge people to play games with their neighbor. Like, maybe you have no clue how to play video games. Well, ask your buddy who you know is into them. Ask him to show you. That's an amazing opportunity to connect with someone and hopefully build a relationship that's going to be meaningful and going to give you an opportunity to point others to Christ. And come on a mission trip with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We do gamer mission trips where we have people come to shows with us. We train them about how to engage with people in a normal way. Apart from getting on Xbox Live or getting online and making your gamer tag hardcore Jesus lover or whatever. We try to help people understand how to engage people in a natural way that's not forced. That's I think more healthy. So if we could just, I think the big thing is to preach and teach in your church in such a way that's not fearful of culture, but rather engages it and really wants to understand. Not all of it's great, sure, not all of it's awesome, but think about the things that are good and are not, so that you can parse those things out and build relationships with people for the sake of Christ.
Very cool. What's your favorite game right now, and something you're looking forward to? There's got to be something.
Oh, man.
I know that's hard. That's hard.
Yeah. Well, I've been playing a lot of Destiny lately, but I don't necessarily really love it. Okay. It's a good but not great game, in my opinion. Yep. But I have been playing a really spooky, incredible game called Neverending Nightmares. Oh, that's it's actually made by a guy who is a believer, and it's about his experience with obsessive compulsive disorder and depression.
Interesting.
So he tried to illustrate through this horror game what his experience is like and help people come kind of see what that was like. And
interesting.
It's pretty profound game. So that's one that I've enjoyed lately.
Nice.
A game that I'm really excited about would be there's a game called This Is My War that is coming out soon, and it's loosely based on the siege of Bosnia.
Oh, interesting.
And so it puts players in control of civilians trying to survive the war.
Oh, really?
Rather than soldiers, you know, trying to conquer. So it's sort of like it's a reverse war game.
Yeah, that's
where
interesting.
You're managing resources and you're making difficult moral decisions about survival. But yeah, it looks pretty cool.
Interesting. Well, anything else you'd love to share with our listeners before we jump into the lightning round?
Not really. Just would encourage people to check out gamechurch.com, and if you want to follow, we have a community of people who are into games who hang out on Facebook. It's called Game Church City. So encourage people, just search Game Church City on Facebook. You'll find us. And yeah, consider coming on a mission trip with us. We want to help believers, want to help Christians think about how to come alongside us in the mission of engaging gamers.
This is the Unseminary Podcast. Stuff you wish they taught in seminary.
Well, let's jump into the lightning round. That's the part of the show where we ask similar questions of people who have been on the show in the past. Today, we're super excited to have Drew Dixon on the line with us today from Game Church. I really would encourage you to make sure you drop by gamechurch.com and check out their site. I find it fascinating. I think it's they're doing an incredible job trying to engage this culture in a real positive, I'd say a pro game kind of environment. Like it's not, we're trying to condemn you, all you bad people who play video games. And I think even just purely for church leaders that are listening today that would say, hey, there's a segment of your church, probably a large segment of your church that every week spend time playing games. This is a great place to start to kind of understand the culture a little bit more. So, Drew, what is an online resource you're using these days that you're finding particularly helpful for your ministry?
I use Google Drive obsessively.
That's great.
That's just like for me. I'm an editor, so
yes.
We have all of our writers send in their articles in Google Drive, so it's really easy to comment on them and give those writers feedback so they can make changes to their articles. So that's something I use obsessively. We record podcasts too, so that's one of the amazing things is Skype, and it's so easy to record from, like you're doing right now.
Exactly.
And so you can. Those are things that you easily can create resources for your church that are fantastic. So,
very cool. Yeah, Google, you got to get on the Google Apps, Google Drive. If you don't know about that, you are missing out as a church leader for sure.
Yeah.
What's a book you've read in the last 6 months to a year that's had an impact on your thinking?
Yeah, I just read the Checklist Manifesto by Atul I'm going to butcher this, but Atul Gawande, I think, something like that.
Fantastic book.
Yeah, I found it fascinating. So he's a surgeon, and he just tells these amazing stories about miraculous people. One of them was about this girl who was fell into a frozen lake and was underwater for 30 minutes before she was rescued, and they were able to save her. And what saved her was a checklist, something so simple that we don't think about, but the book's about getting things right the first time, and the simple process of having a checklist that you go through to make sure you do everything excellently and the way that it's supposed to be done makes a huge difference. So it's not like I don't know if he's a Christian or not. I have no idea. It's not like a super Jesus-y book, but I found it really, really insightful, really helpful.
It is. That's a fantastic book. I know one of the things that, for me, that when I read that kind of messed with my head is, he points out the fact that people at the very top of, really some of the smartest people around, astronauts, in his case, surgeons, use airline pilots, where there's like high risk, a lot of moving parts in those environments. They use checklists regularly as a part of the way they get work done. And, so he's kind of, it's a manifesto. He's trying to say like, hey, you should be doing it in your world as well. It's fantastic. What's another ministry out there that's inspiring you these days that you're like, oh, that's I want to learn from them or just think they're doing great stuff?
Yeah. I definitely want to plug a ministry called Christ and Pop Culture. You can go find it at christandpopculture.com. So it's actually the site that kind of, I wouldn't be at Game Church were it not for Christ and Pop Culture. So I started writing for Christ and Pop Culture, and then I started editing for that site some, and I don't work with them anymore, but I started doing a column on video games for that site where week, it was a column called When Games Matter. And so each week I would share an experience I had playing a game that made me think as a Christian, that was meaningful, that was a way I could engage video games kind of as a follower of Jesus. So doing that was what connected me to Mikey Bridges, who's the founder of Game Church, and he was like, I like your writing, you should think about doing some of this for us. And Yeah, so it's a site that takes the whole of pop culture, not just gaming, but movies. You can find articles about politics, but they're very thoughtful. You can find articles about TV and all kinds of all facets of pop culture, and their goal is to engage them and help Christians think rightly and truthfully, but also very thoughtfully about pop culture. So that's a great site if you're concerned with cultural engagement. I think it's a fantastic resource.
Cool. Great. Well, just two last questions. If you could get 15 minutes with any leader alive today, who would you want to get that time with and why?
Yeah, that's tough, but I just sort of defaulted. I think when you asked me this question before, and I defaulted to Tim Keller is probably who I would spend time with, just because I think he's someone who thinks very, I don't know that there's a more thoughtful preacher of the gospel.
Right.
I mean, obviously he's deeply biblical in his teaching, but just somebody who really makes an effort to understand culture and preach in a way that's thought-provoking and really compelling. So yeah, it'd be cool to sit down with Tim Keller and chat. So.
That's great. Cool. Great. Well, when you're not writing at Game Church or, playing video games, what do you do for fun? Just to kind of blow steam off a little bit, have fun.
Yeah. These days I play with my kids more than anything because I have a 3-year-old and a 7-month-old.
Nice.
But so it takes up a lot of my time. But I'm a huge soccer fan.
Yep.
So I like to I cheer for Arsenal, watch the English Premier League.
Cool.
And I play adult soccer once a week.
Nice.
Adult league, yeah. So
fun. Well, I really appreciate you being on the show today, Drew. Thank you so much for taking time out. I know you've got lots of things going on in life, so I really appreciate you. If people want to get in touch with you or with Game Church, they can do that at gamechurch.com. Is there any other place that they could kind of track along?
Sure, yeah. You can follow us on Twitter at Game Church. Like I said before, Game Church City is our community on Facebook if you want to just hang out, talk games. Also, you can follow me on Twitter, Drew Dixon, Dixon, Drew Dixon 82, because it's super cool to put the year you were born at the end of your Twitter handle.
Nice.
I've regretted that ever since.
Yes.
But yeah, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at Drew at GameChurch is my GameChurch.com. Drew at GameChurch.com is my email. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's Unseminary podcast. Don't be shy. We'd love to connect. Check out Unseminary Inbox. You can sign up at unseminary.com and we'll send you helpful training resources every week. Plus, you'll gain immediate access to our exclusive members area with tons of resources you can use. Connect with Rich on Twitter at Rich Birch or through email, rich@unseminary.com. Don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode at unseminary.com. It includes links to what we talked about today and more. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Did you enjoy today's episode? Drop by iTunes and leave a review. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's Unseminary podcast. Join us next week when we'll learn more stuff we wish they taught in seminary.